Welcome to Season 2 of Ed Falco on the Air. Today's story is by Alyson Hagy, a writer whose work has long occupied the rough edges of the American landscape and the people shaped by them. She's the author of several celebrated collections and novels, including Graveyard of the Atlantic, the collection from which today's story, Semper Paratus, is drawn. Critics had noticed the flinty toughness of her prose and the elemental force of the world she creates. In a review of Graveyard of the Atlantic, the New York Times Book Review praised the power of her characters and the stark beauty of her writing. Semper Paratus, the Coast Guard motto meaning always ready, follows Randall, the lone woman in a Coast Guard rescue crew stationed on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, nicknamed the Graveyard of the Atlantic. The story unfolds in the aftermath of a disturbing rescue attempt, and like much of Hagy's writing, it's less interested in melodrama than in the complicated emotional residue left behind: guilt, endurance, rivalry, loneliness, and the strange intimacies forged under pressure. Hagy writes with remarkable authority about physical labor and peril, but also about the inner lives of people who struggle to find their way in a world both indifferent and implacable, a world that knows nothing of mercy. We were a good boat crew, a lot better than anything I saw in boot camp, which you would hope was true. We drilled, ran constant checks on our equipment. We had to. There were only 7 of us assigned to the station, a station with an area responsibility of 1,350 miles. And we had hundreds of pleasure craft and buku bad weather to deal with. That made it a choice billet for me, much better than galley duty on the cutter Harriet Lane, which was where I started. At station Ocracoke, I had what I wanted, plenty of contact with boats and water. I can't speak for the guys. We were all after different things in our careers and our lives, and maybe we still are. I'd been with Group Cape Hatteras 2 months, working on promotion to petty officer, when I drew a 3-week rotation on Ocracoke Island. James Leggett was our bosun mate. I believed I could deal with him. He'd been our supervisor on crews with women before. He was career and steady and stuck to his business. The kind of guy you wanted to kid about officer school. Tell him he needed to get his lieutenant's stripes so he could kick some academy ass. He'd gnaw on a laugh if you said that, then shake his blondish head. He liked talking the Coast Guard at an enlisted man's pace. Leggett knew how to run things. Burgoyne, our machinery tech, was slick with engines and every other piece of metal in the harbor. Like a lot of shop rat MTs, Burgoyne kept to himself when he could. So did I. The crew accused me of studying all the time. Then they'd ask why I bothered. Every apprentice seaman from here to Alaska knew I didn't have to bust it for promotion. Promotions were handed to women, like candy. I ignored the shots like I was supposed to. It was basic shit. Part of our lazy downtime talk about R&R and money. The shit that meant something was stowed underneath our work blues, where it was safest. Those weeks at Ocracoke, it was me, Leggett, Burgoyne, Paul Toshiko, Trey Buckner, Lyle Pozick, and Sandy Walker. There were 5 other women at Hatteras, but I was the only one who pulled the straw, which didn't concern me. Like I said, I can eat anything a guy cooks, and I know how to be good crew. I was sure we'd catch some hardcore search and rescue on Ocracoke, the stuff that makes my blood run best. There'd be no dry rot for us. Buckner and Pozek asked me out to play pool at the Jolly Roger the afternoon we transferred down. They'd done their calculating and rank toting and knew we'd be hitting the waves together. I was senior to both of them, though not by much. We needed to be able to look each other in the eye. I'm a lousy pool player, so is Pozek, who's not much good at anything he's not made to focus on. Buckner shoots a mean game and likes to hip slide around the corners of the table like he's on a waxed dance floor, even when there aren't any girls to impress. A shimmy, Pozek calls it, as in, shimmy for me, Buck. At least once a day, Buckner tells me, and everybody else, that he can't wait to finish his hitch. He should have been a Marine. He's got restlessness like it's a four-season allergy. Makes him a ball-slamming shooter, though, all focus and heat, just like it can make him awesome on drills. His body knows how to burn unhappiness for fuel. So we're playing cutthroat, and I'm doing all right, and the Jolly Roger is empty except for a couple of kids eating french fries in a back corner that smells like trapped crab. The jukebox is looping through some old Trisha Yearwood songs, Pozek's choice. We've got time to bitch about our assignment, which we don't. Maybe because I don't feel like clipping Buckner's claws when he gets snotty, which he will. I've got this feeling it's better if we stay quiet on the subject. Then Leggett walks in, all broad shoulders and regulation. I can tell by the stoked way he moves in from the black square of the door that he knew we'd be here. He orders a Coke, comes over to the table. Lyle, he says, Trey, Randall, using my last name like they all do. Pozek invites him into the game, but he says no, not this time. He'll just stand by. Leggett is a watcher. We all know that. Question is, what's the man, our superior, hope to see? Some cold coast in Michigan, that's where Leggett is from. He told me once that seeing the big cutters on the Great Lakes did him in as a kid, worse than a junior high romance. The Coast Guard kissed him hard. Tonight, he seems so keyed his voice drags on a drawl I haven't heard before, and I hear him talk to Buckner about a mutual friend of theirs who's a tech on the Hatteras buoy tender. The friend has racked up some negative with the chief. Pozek then has to go goofing on me, doing the male dog thing that guys do to get attention when they outnumber the girls in a room, even if the girls aren't ones they're thinking about screwing, not with the front part of their brains. He tells Leggett I suck as a pool player. It's a good thing I toss line better than I slide a stick. He says it every way he can to make Leggett laugh, which doesn't happen. Then it's my turn, and I can feel Leggett surveying my back, casting a shadow between my shoulders. I miss a semi-tough shot on the 11 ball. Pozek slaps the rail of the table. Buckner nails me with his brown eyes, which always go darker around the edge when there's a bosun or anyone else close by who might call his number. Buckner looks at me and shrugs, turning away to the bar to get a refill for his beer. Yeah, his eyes say, Randall sucks at pool and everything else outside the system. What else is new? I spend a little time, like 3 seconds, trying to frame up why Buckner might have it in for me. Then I drop it. We all have our moods. Then something about the satisfied way Pozek is chewing his bottom lip takes me back to recruit training at Cape May. My company commander never made a face like that. CC was never satisfied. But there was a girl in my company. Name was Yancey Treat, from some pothole town near St. Louis, who practiced twisting her brown mouth that way. She was in the Guard to get a government job and keep it. Don't waste your blood heat on a paycheck. Don't pretend. Yancey liked to tell me how she was going to wait out all the bullshit boat procedure, how soon she'd be behind a desk forever, snacking on her busy lip. Last I heard, she was a seaman on the Mohawk down in the Florida Keys, collecting Haitians from Lincoln log rafts and sailing them away from fenced-in America. We finished up our game when Buckner sank 2 cracking bank shots on the 2-ball and the 5-ball. Leggett left before that. As he hit the door, he told me he'd see me whenever. His mouth was as straight as a ruler, and his left hand cupped the knobby bone above his fresh-shaved neck, a thing it always did when he was thinking hard. He was making the effort. I could see that. But it was still true he was fighting to keep things even between us. I'd noticed it for a couple of weeks, ever since I spliced a moor line on a drill and turned to see him memorizing me. It was like an uncorked smell in the air, rank and sweet at the same time. Temptation. We both recognized it, and being old hands, we knew better than to do anything about it. I was driving, and Buckner asked me to stop at the store so he could get cigarettes, which I did. Pozek went with him just to wander the aisles and flirt with the high schooler pecking at the cash register. A few of our guys play up the sailor in a port attitude, acting like their haircuts and wrapped in plastic dress uniforms mean something. But we aren't Navy. That gets drilled into our heads in boot camp and beyond. For us, there isn't ever any shore leave, not like the Swabbies have it. Maybe at the air stations, yeah, where we have pilots and jumpsuit officers, but not in these tiny harbor towns. Semper Paratus. You don't shit in your own nest. If Buckner and Pozek want to screw around, they'd be smart to go way up the beach to Nag's Head to do it. Me, I like to go even further when I had the chance. So we got to the station without much talking, though Buckner at least seemed to think he'd checked something off his list by including me in the game. The way he said goodnight dropped him just short of being a full-bird asshole. I went to the prefab I had all to myself, finished unpacking, sat on my bunk for a while trying to decide which manuals I was most likely to read. At 2200, the klaxon rang for the motor lifeboat crew to respond to a foundering cabin cruiser a mile southeast of the inlet. The call went well. We were able to bail the cruiser with the portable pump before we escorted her in. I was asleep 15 minutes after I went off the watch. We'd served most of our stint before the bad thing happened. It was early spring, the days were clearing off in 2s and 3s, but we'd seen gale force winds a couple of times, taking 10 to 12 calls. This is why I can say our crew was good. We'd handled some tricky stuff, including a night tow of a ketch through Tech's Hole. We weren't cocky. That's not a feeling any of us believed we could afford. But we know how to make certain kinds of decisions together. So it's hard, even now, to bring it all into focus. Parts are as clear as can be. I can run them like high-resolution video behind my eyes again and again, even though visibility was poor near the end because of the darkness and the storm. I've got stark mental snapshots I have to live with. What I don't have is enough peace or logic, if there are such things. Sammy Walker was standing watch when the call got relayed. An inshore charter scooting down the sound with the tide out late like they sometimes are if they want to catch mullet for bait, spots what looks like an empty skiff banging off the lee side of a dredge island southeast of Howard Reef. The captain calls it in. He can't get close enough to see much. The sandbars there are crazy, especially at ebb tide. Plus, the wind is kicking pretty good. He's got it at 20 or 25 knots out of the north. He thinks we ought to take a look. Sammy gets a position, asks if the captain can see any other craft in the area, but the captain gives a negative on that. Sammy rings in Leggett, shows him the chart that puts the skiff's position close to the northern border of our AOR. Leggett orders up a crew for the rigid hull inflatable. The position is way too shallow for the motor lifeboat. That's when we get our bell. 3 minutes after the call. 3 more minutes, and we've suited up and cast off, leaving Burgoyne, Tashika, and Walker to man the fort. Some good news, some not so good. We had 15 or 20 minutes of daylight left, mostly because the weather was clear to the west and we were catching a lot of reflected sun off a hanging cloud bank. But the barometer was dropping, and that northern wind was as fresh as the charter captain said. We took it full in the face as soon as we changed course out of Bigfoot Slough Channel. Sammy radioed us with 2 bits of information. One was that Station Hatteras had been called out on a possible Gulf Stream collision, and the air station at Elizabeth City was pitching in on that, so everybody was tied up. We might not be able to snag a copter if we decided to look for floaters. Second was the report of a squall headed right down the coast, hard rain, winds over 40 knots. None of it bothered Leggett, who was at the wheel as our cox. What bothered him was how the tide was running with the wind, which meant A man overboard, if that's what we had, would be damned hard to find in the dark. We rowed in silence, catching plenty of stinging spray off the bow, each thinking our own thoughts. Buckner loved search and rescue as much as I did. Seated portside in his dry suit, helmet and vest, he was dog alert, nose in the air. Both hands were fisted together between his knees. I was stationed as lookout just off the starboard bow, my fingers clove-hitched in anticipation. Posick was in the stern, close enough to Leggett to hear him without shouting. I thought about the possibilities, arranging my ideas in checklists and columns as I imagined Leggett or any good bosun would. I didn't think about how well Leggett wanted me to perform on calls, how that seemed to vent his steam some, seeing me do well. I dodged that thought as I had before. I figured a tourist wouldn't be out in a skiff this early in the year. I wanted to think the person or persons connected were natives, smart enough to wear life jackets and have good habits. An old hand working his crab pots or laying nets for mullet, though most of the locals got off the water for their suppers when they could. Engine trouble, maybe. There ought to be oars aboard, however, unless the operator was a fool. Truth be told, I didn't like my tally. Either the skiff had been abandoned and some lazy bastard had failed to notify us like he was supposed to, or the occupant was in the water, maybe hurt, maybe not. We passed our first clutter of dredge islands as the last light drained away. Because the banks are so unstable, summer dredges have to suck sand from the channels and spit it into piles to keep things passable. And we weren't into summer yet. There were sandbars scattered like thrown rice on the backside of Ocracoke. Leggett knew the surface well, though. We'd run it enough in recent days. And he was counting on me to keep my eyes peeled in the bow. He throttled back the diesel when he had to, waiting for my read on the chop. We sighted the charter boat who'd made the call at 20:07. Without a dinghy aboard, she'd been able to do little but stand by with her lights ablaze. Leggett swung us to starboard, then idled the engine about 100 feet off her stern. Instructions from Sammy put the skiff near a steep bank of dredged sand, maybe 300 yards east. Posick stood spread eagle beside our bosun and aimed a light. Sure enough, she was there, low in the water and white as hot metal in our beam. Buckner, who had binoculars, shouted off her registration, what little he could see with her gunnels so low. Leggett called it in as he gave us enough throttle to counter the pulling tide. He also radioed the charter captain to ask if he'd seen or heard anything. He hadn't. The idea was to slide in above the skiff and secure her fast. The RHI is plenty maneuverable, especially in good hands, but there was still a chance one or two of us would have to go into the water. The charts showed depths of 1 to 4 feet, but we all knew how to be skeptical about the charts, especially after a hard winter. If the skiff wasn't anchored, we'd need to steady her for a search, then proceed from there. Buckner saw the bow line when I did. A tight thread dropped straight off the prow, and we both agreed the skiff might be anchored fore and aft, which would account for her being swamped in the chop. Leggett ordered out the tow line and bridle anyway. I got them ready. He put the diesel in neutral, gave me the order to hail and go board as we came alongside. Posick was still bleaching everything with his light. We caught some rogue swells coming in, however, and that caused our first bit of trouble. Buckner was supposed to grab the craft midship and make fast the line while I boarded, and that's what he started to do. But he heard something, he said later, something animal and pained. We clipped the skiff pretty hard, making our approach in the swells. Maybe that was Leggett's mistake. But he didn't know what we had out there, none of us did. The rain had started to come in at us in needles. What we'd done was knock the kid loose from the starboard side of the skiff. I was in the swamped craft, about to run my regs, check for onboard survivors, check anchor lines, check fuel leaks. But Buckner came aboard right behind me and was out again, overboard, in at least 5 feet of rough water before I could turn and cuss him out. He claimed he shouted before he went in, but I don't remember that. What I remember is Posick's huge white moon of light and how it shielded me from the dark spar of Leggett as Buckner busted procedure and took matters into his own hands. The asshole went in without orders or a line. He figured it was shallow enough, and he said he could actually breathe that kid's fear. It rushed into his lungs and head before he even processed it. Like a grab for a falling baby, he told me later. He shouted to Leggett, "Man in, man in." He did do that when he surfaced, and we knew right away we had more than a floater. But I had to tie off the lines Buckner had neglected first. I had to. Meanwhile, Leggett ordered Posick off the light and into the skiff with me, life buoy in hand. This was a good crew. Buckner left a blank. Posick filled it. I didn't have time to look at Posick's face, what little was visible beneath his helmet, but I didn't have to see his full black eyes to know he was still calm, still greased and ready. Unlike Buckner. He was so damn sure his strong body could fix this one. He pushed the prow of the skiff backward. I felt the shove. Then went under for the kid. No lights. The kid was struggling to grab the skiff, weighed down by the damn waders put on to check nets, unable to get out of the waders because an ankle was wedged and broken in the rusty, shitty mass of rebar that made up the guts of the dredge island. The same rebar that had fouled the kid's nets in the first place. Buckner got the kid up for air, shouting for assistance, saying the kid was trapped, cut the nets, cut the nets. He thought the kid was wrapped up that way. I went in on Leggett's order, clear of Buckner and his armful of thrashing, pulled my light, spit out a high, cold slap of surf. My eyes burned with the first rinse of salt, but I saw Buckner's wide mouth moving under the orange cup of his helmet, repeating something soft and calm I couldn't hear. The kid was still alert enough to cough some. I saw that, too. Then came another rank of swells. Goddamn Posick and Leggett for not seeing they needed to clear off. The water surged in over us and brought the skiff right at Buckner's head. He took the kid down. "Heave to," I screamed. "Back off." Leggett saw my waving arms and hauled the diesel into reverse, gave me as much room as the skiff's anchor lines would allow. Now that I was in the water, I could feel how bad and strange it was to be caught in that yanking backwash. The surf was hammering. My feet searched for purchase on the chunked concrete. I could touch bottom every few seconds, but it didn't last. It took Posick too long to realize he had to cut the skiff's lines and get the damn thing out of there. Too long. Holding the useless life buoy in position, he seemed to want the order relayed through Leggett, who was fighting the wheel, as though he couldn't hear the words any other way. I had to tell him twice. I went under with my light until I could see the huddled shape that made up Buckner and the kid. He was waiting until he was sure it was safe. When the skiff was finally towed free, I signaled Buckner with my light. He powered up with the kid wrapped in his arms. "Goddamn, Randall," he shouted between gulps of air. "You gotta cut this kid free." But it wasn't the nets. I went down the foot clamped between iron and rock. Cut away some mesh. I did that. Cut away the waders. Living all the time in the single-tone roar of the undersea. "No go," I told Buckner. "No go." All gasping and spit. Let me relieve. We were doing it on our own now, together, caged by rain and waves. Buckner squeezing water out of the kid's lungs, or trying to, me diving less than 5 feet, not able to shift the rebar, taking the kid from Buckner's rimrock arms to transfer gentle, even with the froth and breakers. That's a snapshot I have, spikes of black hair around a child's white face. We all look more like children when we're that soaked and cold. I worked that kid, floated her, kept her head up, kissed her with mouth to mouth, wiped the vomit. I felt what Buckner hadn't felt, the buried breasts under my clamping forearm. Not that it mattered. Buckner tried like hell to rip her free. "I'm gonna cut him," he said, shooting up for air. "Tell me to cut his ankle, Randall. It's our only chance." His eyes were round and glazed, like they get when we run through our adrenaline into the sledge of exhaustion. He was gagging salt water, but didn't seem to know it. Another shot I have. Savage, demanding Buckner. Leggett was 30 yards away, bucking the RHI in the surf. But Buckner wasn't looking for orders. He was looking for a way. "No," I said. "You get the tow line from Leggett, and you pull that rebar free. We all pull. Now." We were so different. The fact took hold like a death grip right then, and it nearly stopped us both. I was the best one on the crew for him to work with. He knew it. He knew it damn well. But it made Trey Buckner hate me. I was the one who reeled his crazy, muscled self in, and he never hated me more than that. The hate welded a new color into his full-flushed eyes. I hated him too. He'd fucked procedure from the word go. But it was a good hate, hot and furious in that night water, and it gave us what we needed to try and save that kid. Leggett was trying to keep the inflatable from being beaten ashore, trying to sort out what was happening in the water. Buckner stroked out and signed to Pozek for the gear. It was a long shot. The RHI might not have enough power, especially running against the current, but it was a chance. Burgoyne babied that engine. I was sure I could feel the kid shiver against me while I held her. I believed that. It wasn't too late. Buckner rigged the line right beneath us, then gave Pozek the thumb. I did what I had to do. Cradled that girl against a pillow of concrete so I could shield her from the waves. Buckner dove to rip at the rebar with his hands. He was frantic now, though I only knew that from the sandpapering of his breath. He no longer yelled or wasted motion. Tore that kid free. That's what he did. Somebody later told me the whole operation took a little over 15 minutes. It's a slow-mo distortion I don't need to relive. The inside of the kid's foot was peeled out of its skin. Half of Buckner's fingers, even with the gloves, were no better. It didn't matter. We couldn't revive her. Not with Pozek and Leggett working fresh. Not with the airlift 30 minutes later. We broke her ribs, her sternum, never got her back. 16 years old, from a long-time island family. She'd gone to pull nets for an ailing grandfather. Not the first drowning they'd suffered, I was told. Probably not the last. For me either, or any of us. I'd pulled floaters before, but I'd never lost a live one. I thought I knew enough not to let her haunt me. Part of this job demands coping with being too late. I think of frost-faced Yancey Treat when I think of that. Then there are the mistakes. Did you make them? Can you admit them? Do you blame a man or a woman for not acting the way you think you might? Do you want them to act the same? Buckner tortured himself over that girl's death, claimed he knew her from the ice cream shop or someplace like that, even though we knew it wasn't true. He believed what he wanted to believe, that we could have done it. I'm not so sure. You don't get to pick your water or your weather out here, and you don't get fair chances. Always ready. That's our responsibility, and it's the only responsibility I'll ever swear by, in the Coast Guard or out. You don't get to find your luck in this life. You have to be prepared for anything, including the worst. Leggett kept us together for the next few days. That was his job, and he did it. He gave us no time to think or brood. The calls kept coming. We kept responding. Semper, Semper. A small yacht ran aground because the skipper was drunk and stupid. A trawler out of Wanchese was reported overdue. A ferry had engine trouble. The High County Sheriff passed on a tip about marijuana being smuggled through the harbor by some sailboat yuppies. I worked the girl's loss out of my system like soreness out of my muscles. I made it a physical matter. Things went blank between me and Leggett, though. He wide-eyed me, but it wasn't the same. It was like the failure with that girl, which we didn't talk about except officially, and the forgiveness, which we somehow owed each other, froze all channels between us. He didn't write up Buckner for jumping the gun. That may have been a scrap thrown my way. I don't know. It was a while before we could pass each other in the hallways or on the docks like normal people. No shuttered faces, no stops and starts, and then it was all right. The scent trail was gone. Pozek was another matter. He went big sister pissed at Buckner, rabbit punching him with fake newspaper headlines to make him mad. Selfless rescue swimmer fails. USCG witnessed a teen drowning. But Pozek had nothing to say to me. He knew he should have reacted faster when he was on the skiff, but he couldn't be sure his screw-up had made any difference. Instead of running the scenario over and over in his head, sanding it down to livable, he tried to scrape his way into Buckner's thick hide, which was the exact wrong place to be. With me and Buckner, it was more complicated. We developed a thundercloud survivor's bond, all gloom and hovering. He still called me Randall, and it wasn't a friendship in a way. Not one. It wasn't a sex thing either, though we had to try that, with Buckner's stiff, scabbed hands to know it. We didn't shoot pool anymore, and had only one halfway regular conversation over warm coffee, and that mostly about his growing up in South Carolina with a son of a bitch dad, and how he was no longer in touch with any of his brothers. What we had between us was the dirty fact we fit together when things were dire and messed up, and only then. I could see how he wanted another dose of it, Buckner did. But not by talking about what happened or about that girl, Carla Wahab. I'll bet he didn't mouth the syllables of her name more than once, even when he was cutting himself up about her death. What he wanted was more rage and swimming, a merciless heart pounding harder than the merciless surf. Risk, blind rescue. I'd been there with him, and he knew I wanted it too. I meant to tell Posek that what we'd been through wasn't worth it, even after he lay down hints about my body like he was some kind of jealous when all Buckner and I had gained was one fucking coping. Who wants deafness and loss of speech, the inability to communicate with anything except to see you can't change? Except telling Posek that would have been a lie. I thought of those castaway moments when I polished brass in the stale, mosquitoed harbor. I'd riptide into daydreams about them, surrounded by men as I was. Buckner and I truly could not bear each other, not in orgasm or chore, but we found the pitiless, unwinnable world we all imagine, all know, and it was, in ways I didn't yet understand, the world we'd clearly trained for. You've been listening to Alyson Hagy's Semper Paratus. Alyson Hagy is a favorite of mine, and I encourage you to seek out more of her work, including her collection, Graveyard of the Atlantic. If you'd like to support this podcast, the simplest way is to share it with a friend, a student, or anyone interested in short stories. If you have comments on this or any story I've read in the podcast, you can contact me at falco.ed@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and please come back next week when I'll read Glossolalia from Carl Miner's collection, Praying Drunk, published by Saruman Press. Till then, be well. Take good care.